The last guest had barely stepped onto the porch when my 8-year-old grandson tugged gently at my black sleeve. His voice was so quiet, I almost missed it. "Grandma, Grandpa told me to give this to you only after everyone stopped watching you." He slipped an old cream-colored envelope into my trembling hands. Across the front in my husband's unmistakable handwriting were just 4 words. "For Beverly, alone." My heart stopped. Everyone believed Bill had already left his final letter, the one our family had cried over only an hour earlier. So why was there another one? Before I could hide it, I looked up and caught my daughter Melissa staring at the envelope from across the room. The color drained from her face. She turned away so quickly, it was as if she'd been caught doing something she never wanted me to see. At that moment, I knew my husband's final goodbye wasn't over. It was only beginning. Before we continue, I'd love to know something about you. If this story already makes your heart ache, would you leave a like it helps stories like this find people who may need them today? And if you've ever discovered that someone you trusted was hiding the truth, tell me in the comments. I read everyone because your stories matter too. If you're new here and enjoy emotional family stories that stay with you long after they end, I'd be honored if you subscribed. Finally, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is there right now. I always smile seeing how people from all over the world gather together to share these moments. People often tell you that 47 years pass in the blink of an eye. They're wrong. 47 years are made of thousands of ordinary mornings. Cups of coffee shared across a kitchen table, quiet drives to the grocery store, arguments that seem important until you forget what they were about. Christmas mornings, hospital waiting rooms, birthdays, rainstorms. Countless little moments that slowly become a lifetime. That was my life with William Turner. Everyone called him Bill. To me, he was simply the man who always knew how to make me laugh before I had the chance to cry. We met when I was 22. I had just started working as an assistant librarian at a small elementary school outside Columbus, Ohio. Bill was a young civil engineer overseeing a bridge renovation nearby. Every Thursday, he stopped by the library during lunch because, according to him, it was the quietest place in town. Years later, he admitted the books had nothing to do with it. "I only came because there was a pretty librarian who smiled every time I walked in." I still remember rolling my eyes when he finally confessed. "You wasted 6 months pretending to like mystery novels." He laughed. "No, I ended up liking both." That was Bill. Simple, patient, never dramatic. At least that's what I believed for nearly 5 decades. We married less than 2 years later. Neither of us had much money. Our first apartment was so small that the kitchen table also served as my sewing desk and his workspace. When it rained hard, we had to place towels beneath one living room window because the frame leaked. We used to joke that the apartment had indoor weather. Back then, happiness wasn't something we searched for. It simply lived with us. Years passed. Bill's career grew. Mine changed too. Eventually, I became the head librarian at the elementary school where I had started. We bought our first house. The same white 2-story home where I still live now. The same house where both our children took their first steps. The same house where Bill took his last breath. Melissa arrived first. She was fearless from the beginning. As a little girl, she climbed every tree in our neighborhood. She scraped her knees almost weekly. Bill used to call her his little tornado. Daniel was born 3 years later. He couldn't have been more different, quiet, thoughtful. The kind of little boy who cried if he accidentally stepped on an insect. Growing up, they argued like every brother and sister. Then 5 minutes later, they would be laughing together again. Looking back now, those memories hurt more than I can explain, because somewhere along the way, something changed. Melissa married Jason Carter. He owned a small home remodeling business. He was charming, friendly, always talking about his next big opportunity. Daniel married Emily. She taught third grade at the same school where I had once worked. Emily became the daughter I never had to ask for. She called every Sunday. She remembered birthdays. She noticed when I looked tired. Then came Noah, my first grandchild. Bill adored that little boy. If Noah wanted to fish, Bill bought fishing poles. If Noah wanted to build birdhouses, Bill filled the garage with wood scraps. If Noah wanted to hear dinosaur stories, well, Bill somehow became an expert on dinosaurs overnight. Sometimes I wondered who enjoyed those afternoons more, the grandfather or the grandson. When Bill was diagnosed with heart disease, Noah was only 7. We didn't tell him everything. Children understand more than adults realize, but they shouldn't have to carry every burden. Bill insisted life continue as normally as possible. "No hospitals unless necessary," he said. "No pity. I want memories, not sympathy." For a while, that's exactly what we had. Family dinners every Sunday, baseball games on television, barbecues in the backyard, birthdays, laughter. Then, about 6 months before Bill died, small things began to change. At first, I barely noticed. He started taking long drives by himself. Whenever I asked where he'd gone, he'd smile, just clearing my head. Sometimes he'd come home carrying nothing. No groceries, no coffee. Nothing to explain where he'd spent 3 hours. I assumed retirement had made him restless. Then there were the phone calls. Bill had never been secretive. If the phone rang, he'd answer right beside me. Suddenly, he began stepping outside, closing the back door, speaking so softly I couldn't hear a single word. The first time I asked who had called, he answered almost too quickly. "Just an insurance question." A week later, "It was the bank." Another time, "Wrong number." Each explanation sounded reasonable, but together, they didn't. Then came the evenings in his study. For 47 years, Bill had left his office door open. Always. Now he closed it. Sometimes I woke after midnight and saw light beneath the door. I'd walk quietly down the hallway. I could hear pages turning, a pen scratching paper. Once, I gently knocked. "Bill." The room went silent. A second later, the chair moved. The door opened only halfway. His smile looked forced. "You should be asleep." I could say the same thing. "I'm almost finished." "What are you working on?" He hesitated, long enough for me to notice. "Just organizing paperwork." I kissed his cheek. "Don't stay up too late." "I won't." He lied. I know that now. There was another thing. Thomas Reed, Bill's attorney. Thomas had been our family lawyer for almost 30 years. Good man, honest, reliable. Bill suddenly started meeting him every couple of weeks. I teased him once. "Planning to leave me for someone younger?" He laughed so hard he nearly spilled his coffee. "Absolutely. I hear 80-year-old widows are very popular." I laughed with him. It never crossed my mind that those meetings had anything to do with danger. I thought he was updating the will, nothing more. One afternoon, about 3 months before he died, I walked into the garage looking for gardening gloves. Bill quickly slid a folder into one of the cabinets. It happened so fast, he probably thought I hadn't noticed. "What are you hiding?" I asked jokingly. "My terrible handwriting. You've never cared about that before." He smiled. "I do now." Then he changed the subject. At dinner that evening, he asked Noah about school. He complimented Emily's homemade pie. He talked football with Daniel. He asked Jason how business was going. Everything felt normal. Yet looking back, I realized Bill wasn't simply making conversation. He was watching, listening. paying attention to every word around the table, as if he were trying to remember something or confirm something. The last strange moment happened only 5 days before he passed away. I woke before sunrise. His side of the bed was empty. I found him sitting alone on the back porch, wrapped in his old blue flannel jacket, holding a photograph from our wedding day. I sat beside him, without speaking. After several minutes, he squeezed my hand. "If something ever surprises you after I'm gone..." He stopped, then smiled. "Promise me you'll finish reading before you decide how you feel." I frowned. "What does that mean?" He looked toward the sunrise. "I just don't want you to judge too quickly." I thought he was talking about grief, about missing him, so I kissed his shoulder. "I'll be fine." He looked at me with eyes full of sadness. "No. You'll be strong." At the time, I believed those words were simply a husband's final attempt to comfort his wife. Now, standing in the silent house with that second envelope hidden inside my sweater, I finally understood. Bill hadn't been preparing for death. He had been preparing me for whatever came after it. I stood in our bedroom for almost 10 minutes before I opened the envelope. It rested on my lap while I sat on the edge of our bed, the same bed Bill and I had shared for 47 years. His pillow was still slightly indented. His reading glasses still sat on the nightstand. His favorite novel remained open, a bookmark tucked neatly between the pages, as if he planned to finish it after breakfast. My fingers traced the familiar handwriting one last time. For Beverly, alone. My chest tightened. I whispered into the silence. "What did you leave me, Bill?" No one answered. Only the old grandfather clock downstairs broke the silence with its slow, steady ticking. I carefully slid my finger beneath the flap. The paper was thick, older than I expected. Inside was a folded letter, a small brass key, a business card, and a handwritten note folded separately. My hands began to shake. I unfolded the letter first. The first line stole the air from my lungs. "My dearest Beverly, if you're reading this, then I couldn't find another way to tell you goodbye." Tears blurred the words almost immediately. I wiped my eyes and forced myself to continue. "First, forgive me. For 47 years, I promised I would never keep anything important from you. Today I'm asking you to forgive me because I broke that promise." I stopped reading. Bill had never asked for forgiveness, not once. If he apologized, it was over little things. For forgetting milk, for tracking mud across the kitchen floor, for falling asleep during a movie. Never something like this. I took a slow breath and continued. "Everything I hid from you was meant to protect you, not because I doubted your strength, because I knew your heart." I pressed my hand against my mouth. That sounded exactly like him. Bill always believed I cared too much. He used to joke that I would apologize to someone who accidentally bumped into me. Maybe he wasn't entirely wrong. The next paragraph was shorter. "There are things I discovered that I wish had never happened. If I had told you while I was alive, you would have confronted people before I had proof. I couldn't allow that." My heartbeat became louder. Proof of what I kept reading. "You must promise me one thing. Tell no one about this letter. Not Melissa, not Daniel, not Thomas, not even Noah. Finish everything first." I frowned. Why wouldn't I tell Thomas? His attorney was standing right beside Bill's casket only hours earlier. If anyone already knew, surely it was Thomas. Unless Bill hadn't trusted anyone completely. I unfolded the separate note. Only one sentence was written there. Begin with the key. I picked up the small brass key. Attached to it was a faded tag, a number. 214. Nothing else. The business card answered the next question. First, Federal Bank Safe Deposit Department, downtown Columbus. My eyes moved back to the letter. Bill had anticipated every question. The key opens a safe deposit box. Go alone. Go before anyone asks you about selling the house. I froze. Selling the house? No one had mentioned that. Not yet. Why would Bill write that? Was he simply guessing? Or did he already know someone would ask? A chill spread across my arms. I continued reading. Everything you need is inside that box. Read it slowly. Don't skip ahead. Every answer depends on the one before it. That sounded exactly like an engineer. Organized, precise, methodical. Even after death, Bill had created instructions. Then came another paragraph, one I would never forget. You may become angry. You may become heartbroken. Please don't let your first emotion become your final decision. I lowered the pages. Those words echoed something he had said days before he died. Promise me you'll finish reading before you decide how you feel. At the time, I hadn't understood. Now, I did. At least a little. I continued. I have loved every member of our family. Nothing in these pages changes that. People sometimes make terrible decisions while trying to solve impossible problems. Remember that before you judge them. The sentence confused me. Who was them more than one person? Or was Bill simply speaking generally? The answer still stayed just beyond reach. Then I reached the final paragraph. My breathing stopped. If you're reading this, someone I loved has already betrayed you. I stared at the sentence. Once, twice, 5 times. The words never changed. Betrayed. Not disappointed. Not hurt. Betrayed. I whispered the sentence aloud. Someone I loved. That meant someone Bill loved too. Family. There was no other possibility. My mind immediately rejected the idea. Melissa, impossible. She could be stubborn, impulsive. But betrayal numbered Daniel. Even less likely. He avoided confrontation so much that Emily teased him about apologizing to telemarketers. No, neither of my children could betray us. Could they? I folded the letter carefully, then unfolded it again. Maybe I had misunderstood. Maybe Bill meant someone outside the family. A business partner. A friend. Someone from years ago. But the more I reread the letter, the more impossible that explanation became. I looked again at the business card. First Federal Bank. My eyes drifted toward the bedroom window. Outside, Melissa was helping Jason load folding chairs into the back of their SUV. She laughed at something he said. For a brief second, she looked exactly like the little girl who used to climb maple trees. Then she glanced toward the house. Toward my bedroom window. Our eyes almost met. She quickly looked away. An uncomfortable feeling settled deep inside me. Was I imagining things because of Bill's letter, or had something truly changed? A soft knock interrupted my thoughts. Beverly! Emily's voice. You doing okay? I hurriedly slid the letter beneath one of Bill's sweaters inside the dresser drawer. The key disappeared into my pocket. I opened the bedroom door only a few inches. Emily smiled gently. I made some tea. I thought you might want some. I smiled back. Thank you, sweetheart. She studied my face. You've been crying. I suppose that's expected today? She nodded. I know. Then she hesitated. If you need anything tonight, I'm only a phone call away. I know. She squeezed my hand. There was genuine kindness in her eyes. Nothing forced, nothing hidden. After she walked away, I watched her hug Daniel downstairs. He wrapped an arm around her shoulders. For a moment, I envied them. Their lives still stretched ahead together. Mine suddenly felt divided into two parts. Before the letter, and after it. An hour later, everyone finally left. The house became painfully quiet. I walked through every room, straightened empty coffee cups, folded blankets, picked up forgotten napkins, anything to avoid thinking. But every few minutes, my hand drifted toward my pocket, toward the brass key. Around sunset, my phone rang. Melissa. I almost let it go to voicemail. Instead, I answered. Hi, Mom. Hi. I was thinking. She paused. If keeping this house becomes too much, we should probably talk about your options soon. My grip tightened around the phone. Bill's words echoed inside my head. Go before anyone asks you about selling the house. My stomach turned cold. He had known. Somehow. He had known this conversation would happen. I forced my voice to stay calm. It's only been one day. I know. I didn't mean now. I just worry about you. So do I answered quietly. After we hung up, I sat alone in the dark living room. No television, no music, only silence. I reached into my pocket, placed the brass key in my palm. Tomorrow morning, I was going to the bank, and for the first time since Bill died, I wasn't sure what frightened me more, what I might find inside that safe deposit box, or the possibility that my husband had been right all along. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Bill's handwriting. Someone I loved has already betrayed you. The words refused to leave me alone. At 6 the next morning, I was already dressed. For the first time in years, I left the house without making coffee. The kitchen felt too quiet without Bill humming while he searched for his favorite mug. I picked up my purse. The brass key was still inside. I touched it once, almost as if I needed proof the previous day had been real. Then I drove downtown. The city looked exactly the way it always had. Morning commuters filled the streets. A crossing guard waved children across an intersection. A man walked his golden retriever past a bakery. Life continued as though my world hadn't collapsed. That felt strangely unfair. 25 minutes later, I parked outside First Federal Bank. Bill had banked there for decades. We had opened our first savings account together in that very building. I had no idea there was a safe deposit box. As I stepped inside, cool air wrapped around me. The lobby smelled faintly of polished wood and fresh coffee. A young teller smiled. Good morning. How can I help you? I need access to a safe deposit box? She asked for my identification, then looked at the brass key. Her smile softened. One moment, Mrs. Turner. She disappeared through a hallway. A minute later, an older gentleman approached. My name is Richard. I manage the vault. His expression changed the moment he read my last name. I'm very sorry for your loss. Your husband spoke very highly of you. I blinked. He talked about me. Richard nodded. He visited several times over the past few years. Several times, not once, not twice. Several. A strange feeling settled inside me. How many secrets had Bill carried alone? Richard led me through 2 locked security doors. The hallway grew quieter with every step. Finally, we reached a heavy steel vault. Rows upon rows of small metal boxes covered the walls. He stopped in front of one. Number 214. The same number attached to my key. He inserted the bank's master key. I inserted Bill's. The lock clicked. Richard carefully removed the metal box and placed it on a private table. "I'll leave you alone. If you need anything, simply ring the bell." The door closed behind him. I stared at the box. For several seconds, I couldn't bring myself to open it. Then, very slowly, I lifted the lid. Inside were 5 things: 3 thick black journals, 1 small flash drive, a large sealed envelope, several neatly organized legal folders, and a stack of family photographs tied together with blue ribbon. I hadn't expected photographs. My hands reached for them first. The top picture showed Bill holding newborn Melissa in the hospital. His smile stretched from ear to ear. The next was Daniel's high school graduation. Another showed Noah catching his very first fish beside Bill. There were dozens, maybe hundreds. Every photograph reminded me of a different chapter of our family. Then I noticed something. On the back of each picture, Bill had written dates, tiny memories, short sentences. "The happiest camping trip. Melissa finally forgave Daniel for breaking her bicycle. Noah laughed so hard he fell into the lake." I smiled despite myself. Then I found one photograph that made my smile disappear. It had been taken only 8 months earlier. All of us stood together on our back porch after Thanksgiving dinner. Everyone smiled. Everyone looked happy. On the back, Bill had written only 4 words: "Nothing stays hidden forever." My stomach tightened. He already knew. Before that photograph had even been printed, he already knew something was wrong. I carefully placed the pictures aside. Next came the legal folders. Each one had typed labels: property records, financial statements, account activity, estate documents. Bill had organized everything with incredible precision. Colored tabs, dates, handwritten notes, even paper clips arranged neatly, exactly the way an engineer would. Then I picked up the large envelope. Across the front, Bill had written, "Read this before the journals." I broke the seal. Inside waited another letter. "Beverly, if you have reached this point, thank you for trusting me enough to keep going." I swallowed hard. The journals contain difficult truths. Please don't read them until you understand why I began writing them. I continued. Nearly 3 years ago, I noticed something small. A bank statement had been opened before I saw it. Nothing was missing. Nothing appeared wrong. Still, I knew I hadn't opened it. That didn't sound alarming. It could happen, couldn't it? Then came the next paragraph. Weeks later, another statement disappeared. Then a canceled check. Then copies of insurance paperwork. Each incident alone meant nothing. Together, they formed a pattern. I leaned back. Bill hadn't jumped to conclusions. He had watched, observed, collected facts, exactly the way he approached every problem in life. The letter continued. At first, I believed someone outside our family had gained access. I changed passwords, changed locks, moved documents. Nothing stopped it. A cold sensation crept into my chest. Eventually, I realized whoever was doing this knew our routines, knew where important papers were kept, knew which documents mattered, I whispered. "Oh, Bill." The next sentence hurt even more. That realization frightened me more than my diagnosis. I closed my eyes. He had been facing heart disease, and this, completely alone. Why hadn't he told me the answer arrived immediately? I wanted to tell you. Many times. But you would have confronted everyone immediately? Without proof, accusations would have destroyed our family. He knew me too well. I would have, without hesitation. I would have demanded answers from everyone. Instead, he stayed silent. The final page contained instructions. Now read the journals in order. Do not skip ahead. The truth unfolds slowly. Every page explains the next. Remember, people are rarely only good or only bad. Sometimes fear makes decent people make unforgivable choices. There it was again. Fear. Bill mentioned fear twice now. Not greed, not hatred. Fear. I placed the letter beside the photographs, then picked up the first journal. Its cover was worn from use. Inside the first page, Bill had written only one sentence. This is not a diary. This is evidence. A chill ran through me. The first entry was dated almost 3 years earlier. Today I noticed someone entered my office while I was mowing the lawn. Nothing was stolen, but papers had been moved. The next entry came 6 days later. Someone searched my filing cabinet again. This time, I photographed everything before leaving the room. Another entry. A folder containing property records changed position. Then another. My signature appears to have been practiced on scrap paper. I stopped breathing. Practiced who would practice someone else's signature. I turned another page. Bill had taped small photographs beside the entries. Pictures of papers exactly where he had left them. Then, pictures showing they had been moved. Another page showed envelopes opened with steam and resealed. Another showed drawers left open only half an inch. Tiny details, things almost anyone would overlook. Except Bill. Every page made one thing painfully clear. This wasn't paranoia. Someone really had been searching through our documents. I suddenly noticed something tucked inside the back cover. A yellow sticky note, in Bill's handwriting. Don't assume you know who it is. I was wrong 3 times before I found the truth. I stared at those words. 3 times? Even Bill had suspected the wrong person. That frightened me more than anything. Because now, I couldn't trust my own instincts either. The vault suddenly felt smaller. The air seemed heavier. I looked around the quiet room. No one else was there. Only me, Bill's journals, and answers waiting patiently inside hundreds of handwritten pages. I realized I wasn't leaving with certainty. I was leaving with something much more dangerous. Questions. Questions that could destroy everything I believed about my own family. I left the bank carrying a canvas bag that suddenly felt heavier than anything I had ever lifted. Not because of the journals. Not because of the legal files. Because every page inside that bag had the power to change how I saw my own family. When I reached home, I locked the front door behind me. Then, I did something I had never done before. I closed every curtain in the house. Not because I believed someone was watching, because Bill had. At least that's what his journals suggested. The house felt different now. Every room carried a question. Every memory carried doubt. I placed the journals on the dining room table and made myself a cup of coffee. It had finally grown cold enough to drink before I remembered it was there. That never happened before Bill died. He always reminded me. Beverly. Your coffee. I smiled sadly, then opened the journal again. The next entries became more detailed. Bill had started recording dates, times, even weather conditions. March 14th, rainy. The study door was left open exactly 2 inches after I returned from mowing. Nothing taken. Someone searched quickly. Another page. April 2nd. Property folder moved from top drawer to bottom drawer. Only family visited today. then another. April 16th. Melissa stopped by while Beverly was volunteering at church. Asked unusual questions about the mortgage. I frowned. Melissa. Maybe she was simply curious. The next paragraph offered no accusations, only facts. She asked whether the house was fully paid off. She also asked if Beverly knew where I kept the deed. I answered casually. I watched her expression. She seemed disappointed. I leaned back. That didn't prove anything. Melissa had every reason to ask financial questions. Her father had been diagnosed with heart disease. Families discuss those things. Didn't they? I kept reading. The following week's entry shifted my attention. Daniel borrowed my filing cabinet key. Returned it an hour later. Said he needed old tax records for comparison. I frowned again. Daniel. That also sounded reasonable. Bill never accused him. He simply recorded the event. Then came another entry. Jason remained in the garage after everyone else went inside. When I returned, he claimed he was looking for a screwdriver. Nothing missing. My head began to ache. Every single person had behaved oddly, exactly as Bill's sticky note warned. Don't assume you know who it is. He had been right. The evidence pointed everywhere and nowhere. I closed the journal. I needed fresh air. Outside, the flower beds desperately needed watering. Normally, gardening relaxed me. Today, it didn't. Every few minutes, I caught myself staring toward Melissa's house across town. Toward Daniel's school. Toward people I loved. Trying to imagine one of them secretly searching through our papers. It made no sense. The sound of tires on gravel interrupted my thoughts. Melissa's SUV pulled into the driveway. My stomach tightened. She climbed out carrying 2 grocery bags. I brought lunch. She smiled. You probably haven't eaten. I forced myself to smile back. That's thoughtful. She hugged me tightly. Too tightly. Or maybe I was imagining that too. Inside, she unpacked soup bread fruit and bottled water. I know people stop cooking after funerals. I figured this might help. It does. Thank you. She looked around the kitchen. So, how are you really doing? I almost answered honestly, confused, terrified, suspicious. Instead, I said, I'm managing. She nodded slowly. Then her eyes drifted toward the dining room, toward the journals. Fortunately, I had already covered them with a blanket. What are you reading? Oh, just some old photo albums. She smiled. Dad kept everything. Yes, he certainly did. Those words slipped out before I realized how much truth they carried. Melissa laughed softly. He never threw anything away. Then she grew quiet. Mom, I've been thinking. There it was, the conversation Bill predicted. If this house ever becomes too much, we could help you find somewhere smaller. I don't need a smaller house. I know. I'm just thinking ahead. You shouldn't have to handle all this alone. I looked directly into her eyes. When did you first start thinking about me leaving this house? She blinked. I don't know. Recently, I guess. Before Dad passed. She hesitated. A little. Why, no reason. I smiled gently. I was only curious. She relaxed, too quickly. Then Jason walked in carrying another bag. He greeted me warmly, asked how I was feeling. Everything about him appeared perfectly normal. Yet something caught my attention. His eyes moved around the room, not casually, carefully. Almost as though he expected to find something. He glanced toward the hallway, toward Bill's old study. Only for a second. But I noticed. Bill would have noticed too. Jason caught me watching. "You doing okay, Beverly?" "I'm fine." He smiled. "Good." The conversation shifted to Noah's baseball practice, school, weekend plans, ordinary things. Yet beneath every sentence, I now heard questions. What did they know? What didn't they know? After lunch, Melissa began washing dishes. "I'll take care of these," I said. She shook her head. "You've done enough." While she stood at the sink, Jason quietly wandered toward the hallway. I watched him disappear around the corner. Seconds later, I heard the old study door open, then close. I followed immediately. Jason stood inside the room. His back faced me. He quickly turned around. "Oh, I was just..." He pointed toward a bookshelf. I remembered Bill had a history book he wanted me to borrow. I looked at the shelves. Every book remained exactly where it had always been. "Which one?" He frowned. "I can't remember now." "We can look another time." He smiled awkwardly and walked past me. Maybe he truly had forgotten. Maybe not. After they left, I went into Bill's study. Everything looked untouched. Except one desk drawer wasn't fully closed, only about an inch. Exactly the way Bill had described in his journal. A coincidence, I slowly pulled it open. Nothing seemed missing. But one folder had shifted slightly. I couldn't even be sure it hadn't always been that way. That uncertainty frustrated me more than certainty ever could. My phone rang. Daniel. "Hey, Mom." "Hi, sweetheart. I just wanted to check on you. We talked about ordinary things, Emily's students, the weather. Then he surprised me. I'll stop by tomorrow. There's something I wanted to ask Dad before." His voice faded before he died. "What is it?" "Oh, nothing important. It can wait." "No. Tell me." He hesitated. "It was about some paperwork." Paperwork. Another strange coincidence. "What kind?" "Our property tax records." I was comparing mine. His explanation sounded perfectly reasonable. Exactly like the journal entry. After we hung up, I sat alone in the study. 3 people, 3 explanations. Each believable, each innocent, yet together. They created exactly the same feeling growing inside me. Unease. I opened the journal once more. The final entry for that month had been underlined twice. Today, I realized the greatest danger isn't the missing papers. It's that everyone has a reason to look innocent. I stared at those words for a long time. Bill hadn't written that because he distrusted his family. He wrote it because evidence without context could accuse anyone. That realization scared me. Because I had already begun doing exactly what he warned against. Watching every glance, every hesitation, every conversation. Looking for guilt instead of truth. I closed the journal. Outside, the sun disappeared behind the trees. The house grew quiet again. Tomorrow, I would begin the second journal. I prayed it would finally narrow my suspicions. Instead, I had the unsettling feeling it was about to make everything even more complicated. The second journal looked newer than the first. The leather cover wasn't as worn. The pages were filled with fewer observations and more conclusions. That frightened me. The first journal had been about questions. The second, I suspected, would contain answers. I waited until sunrise before opening it. Somehow, daylight made me feel safer. I carried the journal to the breakfast table where Bill and I had shared nearly every morning together. His chair remained empty. I still couldn't bring myself to move it. I opened to the first page. I no longer believe these incidents are random. Someone is preparing for something. I felt my pulse quicken. The next page listed dates. Every suspicious event from the previous journal had been organized into a timeline. Visits, phone calls, missing documents, moved folders, questions about the house. Everything. Bill had highlighted one sentence in blue ink. Patterns reveal what emotions hide. That sounded exactly like him. Whenever something broke around the house, he never guessed. He studied it. He believed facts always spoke louder than assumptions. The journal continued. Today, I intentionally placed the property deed in the top drawer. Tomorrow, I will move it to the safe. Only one person knows my routine. I frowned. Only one person who the next day's entry answered part of the question. The top drawer was searched. The safe remained untouched. Whoever entered expected me to follow my old habits. I slowly closed my eyes. Bill hadn't simply observed. He had begun testing someone. The realization made my stomach tighten. I kept reading. I changed where I store important documents every week. Someone continues searching the previous locations. That tells me they are acting from memory, not direct knowledge. He was narrowing possibilities, patiently, methodically. Page after page showed the same careful approach. Nothing emotional, nothing dramatic, only facts. Then I reached an entry dated almost 18 months before Bill died. Today, I visited Thomas Reed. We discussed additional legal protection. So Thomas had known something was wrong. Not everything, but enough. Another page. Without telling Beverly, I transferred original property records to secure storage. Copies remain inside the study. My breathing slowed. The papers people had been searching had never actually been there. Bill had already moved them. He had been protecting us long before anyone realized. Then came another surprising entry. I intentionally left an outdated insurance folder inside the filing cabinet. It disappeared within 48 hours. He had created bait. Someone had taken it. I whispered aloud. You clever man. I almost laughed. Not because the situation was funny, because Bill had quietly become a detective without telling anyone. The next few pages contained something unexpected. Instead of writing about suspicious behavior, Bill wrote about himself. I hate what this investigation is doing to me. I catch myself doubting people I love. That is the greatest cost. My eyes filled with tears. I understood exactly how he felt. After only a few days, I already questioned every conversation, every glance, every smile. Bill had lived that way for years, alone. Then I reached the longest entry in the journal. The date caught my attention immediately. It was the same week he had first met with Thomas repeatedly. Today, I found what appears to be a forged signature. Everything inside me froze. The next lines were written more heavily than the others. At first, I believed it might be a banking error. It wasn't. Someone attempted to imitate my handwriting. He hadn't written who, not yet, only what happened. He continued. The signature is close enough to fool someone unfamiliar with my writing. Not close enough to fool me. Attached beneath the entry was a photocopy. One signature belonged to Bill. The other looked almost identical, but not quite. The final letter tilted differently. The pressure changed halfway through. Tiny details. Only Bill would have noticed, or perhaps another engineer. I stared at the page for a long time. Someone had actually practiced becoming my husband. That thought made my skin crawl. The next entry surprised me again. I have decided not to confront anyone. Not yet. If I accuse the wrong person, trust inside this family will never recover. I whispered, you were protecting us. Even while someone might have been trying to steal from him. That was Bill, always thinking about everyone else first. Hours passed before I realized I hadn't eaten breakfast. I finally closed the journal and stood to stretch. At that exact moment, someone knocked on my front door. I nearly jumped. Daniel. He smiled as I opened it. I hope I'm not interrupting. No. Come in. He carried a small toolbox. I remembered Dad wanted me to fix the loose porch railing. For a second, I simply stared at him. The porch railing really was loose. Bill had mentioned it weeks before he died. Daniel wasn't inventing an excuse. Still, every explanation now carried two meanings. The obvious one and the suspicious one. Daniel worked outside while I watched through the kitchen window. He repaired the railing exactly as promised. Then he walked inside, wiping his hands with a rag. Done. Thanks. He hesitated. Mom? Can I ask you something? Of course. Have you found Dad's paperwork? My heart skipped. What paperwork? The estate files. I figured he had everything organized. He usually did. I haven't really looked yet. That wasn't entirely true. I had looked, just not where Daniel imagined. He nodded. If you need help sorting things, I'm happy to. I appreciate that. Then something unusual happened. His eyes drifted toward Bill's study. Only briefly, but I noticed, the same way I had noticed Jason. Daniel caught himself immediately. I still expect Dad to walk out of there. He smiled sadly. So do I. That answer sounded genuine, painfully genuine. Maybe I had become too suspicious. After he left, I reopened the journal. Near the end, Bill had written another personal reflection. I no longer fear dying. I fear leaving Beverly without answers. I had to stop reading. Tears blurred the ink. He had spent the final years of his life preparing to protect me. Not from strangers, from confusion, from making the wrong decision. Then I noticed something tucked inside the back cover. A folded sheet of notebook paper. Unlike the journal entries, this wasn't written neatly. The handwriting looked rushed, almost shaken. Today, everything changed. I finally know why. The motive is not greed. It is desperation. I frowned. Desperation. There was that word again. Fear. Desperation. Never greed. Never hatred. Bill kept repeating the same idea. Whoever had done this hadn't started as a criminal. They had become one. The next sentence hit even harder. I cried before writing this. I had almost never seen Bill cry. Only twice. When his father died. And when Noah was born. To imagine him sitting alone, writing those words, broke something inside me. The final sentence on the page left me completely speechless. I know the truth now. But Beverly isn't ready to hear it yet. I stared at those words. He knew. By this point, Bill already knew exactly who had betrayed him. Yet he still hadn't written the name. Instead, he wanted me to keep reading. One journal remained. The flash drive still waited unopened, and somewhere inside all those pages, my husband's final truth was waiting for me. I wasn't sure I was ready to face it, but I also knew there was no turning back anymore. I didn't open the third journal the next morning. Instead, I found myself thinking about Noah. For days, I had been reading Bill's words, listening to Bill's voice inside my head, trying to understand the careful trail he had left behind. But one question kept returning. Why had he trusted an 8-year-old boy with the second letter, not Melissa, not Daniel, not Thomas, Noah? There had to be a reason. Saturday morning arrived with clear blue skies. At exactly 9 o'clock, Noah's small voice echoed through my front door. "Grandma!" Before I could answer, he was already running into my arms. I hugged him tightly. His hug felt wonderfully uncomplicated. Children don't measure affection. They simply give it. Emily had driven him over because Melissa and Jason were attending a community fundraiser. "I'll pick him up after dinner," Emily said. "He wanted to spend the day with you." I wanted him here. After she left, Noah wandered into the kitchen. "Can we make Grandpa's pancakes?" I smiled through a lump in my throat. Of course. Bill had always made pancakes on Saturdays. Not because he was a great cook, quite the opposite. His pancakes were never perfectly round. Sometimes they burned, sometimes they were raw in the middle. But Noah insisted they were the best pancakes in the world. As we mixed the batter flour, somehow ended up on both of our noses. Noah laughed so hard he nearly dropped the whisk. For a few precious minutes, the sadness disappeared. Then he asked quietly, "Grandma?" "Yes. Do you still miss Grandpa every minute?" The question caught me off guard. "I do. I miss him too." He looked down at the bowl. "I still talk to him sometimes." I gently touched his shoulder. "I think he'd like that." Noah nodded. "He told me something before he got sick." My heart skipped. "What did he tell you?" "He said..." Noah frowned, trying to remember the exact words. "Grown-ups sometimes get scared." I stayed perfectly still. "He said scared people don't always tell the truth." The whisk slipped slightly in my hand. "What else did Grandpa say?" "He told me not to be mad if grown-ups acted funny." I forced myself to stay calm. "When did he tell you that? A long time ago?" "Maybe..." He counted on his fingers. "Before Christmas." Before Christmas. That matched the timeline in Bill's journals. "What were you doing?" "We were building my birdhouse." I remembered that afternoon. They had spent hours in the garage together. I had assumed they were talking about baseball. Apparently not. Noah poured chocolate chips into the pancake batter. Then he suddenly looked up. "Oh, I forgot." "Forgot what?" "I still have Grandpa's secret." Every muscle in my body tensed. "Secret?" He nodded happily. "He said I could tell you after he went to heaven." I knelt beside him. "What secret?" He smiled proudly. I helped him hide letters. For several seconds, I couldn't speak. "You helped Grandpa?" "Yep. He gave me envelopes. I put them where he told me." "Did he tell you why?" "He said nobody watches little boys." Those words sent chills through my body. Bill had been right. No one questioned Noah. No one suspected him. He had been the perfect messenger. "How many letters?" Noah shrugged. "I don't know." "Maybe." He stretched out both hands. 5. 5. My mind immediately raced. I had found 2. The one Noah gave me, and the sealed envelope inside the safe deposit box. Were there others? "Where did you hide them?" "I don't remember all of them. I was little." Then he laughed. "I still am little." I laughed too. "You certainly are." We finished breakfast together. Afterward, Noah wanted to play in the backyard. He climbed into the old treehouse Bill had built years ago. I watched from below. Suddenly he shouted, "Grandma, I found something." My heart nearly stopped. He climbed down, carrying a tiny wooden box, covered in dust. I forgot about this. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside wasn't another letter. Instead, there were marbles, baseball cards, a tiny plastic dinosaur, and one folded piece of notebook paper. I unfolded it carefully. Bill's handwriting. Only one sentence. "Noah, thank you for helping your grandpa." Nothing more. No instructions. No evidence. Just gratitude. I smiled. Bill had known Noah would eventually find it again. That simple note reminded me of the man I married. Even while carrying enormous secrets, he still made time to thank an 8-year-old boy. Later that afternoon, Noah sat beside me on the porch. He watched birds gathering around Bill's old feeder. Then he asked another unexpected question. "Grandma?" "Yes." "Why did Mom cry after talking to Grandpa?" Everything inside me froze. The day before Grandpa came to my baseball game." I searched my memory. That would have been about 2 months before Bill died. "What happened?" "I don't know. I was upstairs. I heard Mom yelling." "What did she say?" Noah squeezed his eyes shut, trying to remember. "Something like, 'Please don't tell her.'" The air seemed to disappear. "Please don't tell her." Those words echoed inside my head. Did Grandpa yell back? "No." He was really quiet. What happened after that? Mom hugged Grandpa. Then she cried in the car. I looked toward the backyard, trying to steady my breathing. That conversation matched the journal. The period when Bill wrote he had finally learned the truth. Could Melissa already have known that he had discovered something? Or had they been discussing something completely unrelated? Again, questions, not answers. A little later, Noah disappeared into Bill's workshop. I followed him. He stood beside the old workbench, running his fingers across the wood. "Grandpa always stood here." "I know." "He said this was his thinking place." I smiled sadly. "It was." Then Noah pointed toward the highest shelf. "That's where he hid envelopes." I climbed onto a small step stool. The shelf was empty now. Only a thin layer of dust remained. No letters, but one rectangular space had clearly been protected from the dust. Something had sat there for a long time, then been removed, probably by Bill himself, exactly as planned. That evening, Emily arrived to pick Noah up. As she buckled him into the car, he rolled down the window. I remembered another thing. "What is it?" Grandpa said. He smiled proudly. "The truth isn't a monster. People become monsters because they're afraid of the truth." Emily looked surprised. "Where did he hear that?" I smiled faintly. "I think his grandfather made it up." Driving back toward the house, I repeated those words again and again. The truth isn't a monster. People become monsters because they're afraid of the truth. Bill hadn't been preparing me to hate someone. He had been preparing me to understand them. Yet one mystery remained. Why had Melissa begged him? "Please don't tell her." The third journal still waited upstairs, for the first time. I wasn't sure I wanted to open it, because I had a feeling the next page would finally explain exactly what Melissa had been so desperate to hide. For almost an hour, I stood in front of the flash drive without touching it. It lay on Bill's desk beside my laptop. So small, so ordinary. Yet I had the strange feeling that once I plugged it in, there would be no going back. The journals had given me pieces. Perhaps the videos would finally connect them. I took a deep breath. Then I inserted the drive. Only one folder appeared on the screen. "For Beverly," Nothing else. Inside were 7 video files. Each one was labeled only with a date. No titles, no explanations. I clicked the first one. The screen flickered. Then Bill appeared. He was sitting exactly where I was now, inside his study, wearing his faded blue flannel shirt. For several seconds, he simply smiled at the camera. Then he looked directly into the lens. Directly at me. "Hi, Bev." My eyes instantly filled with tears. His voice sounded so alive that I almost answered him. "If you're watching this, then I wasn't able to tell you these things myself." He paused. "I hope you're sitting down. I know you. You probably aren't." Despite everything, I laughed softly. He knew me too well. Bill continued. "I've recorded these messages because written words don't always carry emotion. I need you to hear my voice. I need you to know I never stopped loving our family." He emphasized the last sentence. Never stopped loving our family. That sounded intentional, almost as though he expected me to question it later. The video continued. "I've made mistakes. The biggest one was trying to carry this alone." He rubbed his hands together. A habit he always had whenever he felt nervous. "I wanted to tell you many times, but every time I imagined your face, I chose one more day." He looked down for several seconds. "I was wrong. I should have trusted you sooner." Tears rolled down my cheeks. "No," I whispered. "You were trying to protect me." The recording couldn't hear me. Bill looked back into the camera. "The journals explain what I discovered. This video explains why I waited." He reached for a folder beside him. "I found evidence. Evidence can prove what happened. It cannot explain why people make terrible choices." I leaned closer. He continued quietly. "I don't want you to remember anyone by their worst decision." That sentence settled deep inside me. Not their worst decision. Then he surprised me again. "I'm not going to tell you the name." I blinked. "What?" The video continued. "If I give you a name now, you'll stop looking. You'll stop thinking. You'll stop seeing. I need you to understand before you know." I sighed. Even now, Bill refused to make things easy. The recording ended, only 6 minutes long. Yet somehow, it answered almost nothing. I clicked the second video. This one had been recorded 3 months later. Bill looked thinner, more tired. His illness had clearly progressed. Still, his voice remained calm. Today I confirmed something. I hoped I was wrong. I wasn't. He reached toward the camera, holding up 2 documents. One genuine, one altered. I've placed copies inside the legal folders. You'll notice they appear almost identical. They're not. The camera zoomed slightly closer. He pointed to several lines. The ownership language changed. The signatures changed. The witnesses changed. Someone had altered official paperwork. Not successfully, but intentionally. Bill looked directly into the camera again. If I had signed these, our home could eventually have been transferred. A cold wave rushed through me. The house. This was always about the house. Suddenly, Melissa's repeated suggestions made me uneasy again. Sell the house, move somewhere smaller, simplify things. Had those conversations begun because of guilt, or because she genuinely worried about me? I still couldn't tell. The video continued. I never signed these documents. I never intended to. I stored the originals elsewhere. I wanted to know who would come back looking. Again. Another trap. Bill hadn't confronted anyone. He had simply waited. The recording ended. I immediately opened the third file. This time, Bill looked exhausted. Dark circles surrounded his eyes. He smiled anyway. "I have good news." I frowned. Good news. The person responsible still doesn't know they failed. My heart skipped. "What do you mean? The forged documents are legally worthless." "They've never had any effect." "I made sure of that." Relief washed over me. Whatever someone had tried. Bill had already stopped it, without anyone realizing. He smiled gently. "If you're worried about losing the house, don't. You won't." For the first time since finding the letters, I felt my shoulders relax. At least that part of our future remained safe. The next sentence surprised me. "The greatest danger isn't financial anymore. It's emotional. You'll soon learn who stayed silent." Stayed silent, not who acted. Who stayed silent? Another clue. Another mystery. I paused the video. Stayed silent. Immediately, my thoughts returned to Daniel. According to the outline Bill had left, someone had known. Someone had chosen silence. Could that person be Daniel, or someone else entirely? I resumed the recording. If someone knew the truth, that doesn't automatically make them guilty. Fear affects witnesses too. Those words lingered in the room long after the video ended. Fear, again, always fear. Never evil, never hatred. Always fear. The fourth recording began differently. Bill wasn't sitting. He stood in the backyard, near the maple tree where Noah loved climbing. He smiled as children laughed somewhere nearby. Probably Noah. "I chose this place because I want you to remember something." He looked toward the tree. "Our family wasn't built by one mistake. It was built by thousands of loving moments. Don't let one terrible decision erase 40 years. I closed my eyes. That sentence hurt more than anything else, because I already felt it happening. Every happy memory now carried suspicion. Every family photograph contained hidden questions. Bill didn't want that. He wanted balance, truth, but also mercy. The final part of the recording became intensely personal. If Melissa cries, listen. If Daniel stays quiet, listen. If Jason avoids your eyes, listen. If Noah tells you something, believe him. I sat perfectly still. Bill had just mentioned all four of them, not as suspects, as people, each carrying something different, each holding a different piece of the truth. He still hadn't accused anyone. Instead, he had given me instructions for how to understand them. Listen, listen, listen. The recording ended. I leaned back in my chair. The room felt strangely peaceful, not because I had answers, because I finally understood Bill's plan. He wasn't trying to expose someone. He was teaching me how to discover the truth without destroying the family. Just then, my phone vibrated. A text message from Melissa. "Mom, would you like to come over for dinner tomorrow? Noah keeps asking for you." A minute later, another message arrived. From Daniel. "Can we talk sometime this week? There's something I've been meaning to tell you." I stared at both messages, almost simultaneously. Neither of them knew I had Bill's journals. Neither knew about the flash drive, yet both suddenly wanted to talk. Coincidence? Or had something changed? I looked back at the laptop. 3 videos remained. Somewhere inside those recordings, Bill had left the final pieces, and I had the unmistakable feeling the next video would stop asking questions and finally begin naming names. I barely touched the remaining 3 videos. Bill had given me enough to think about. What I needed now wasn't another clue. It was someone who could explain why my husband had spent years preparing for a battle he never told me about. That someone was Thomas Reed, Bill's attorney. I called his office the next morning. His receptionist answered immediately. "Mr. Reed has been expecting your call, Mrs. Turner." Those words sent a chill through me. Expecting my call. Of course he was. Bill had planned everything. An hour later, I walked into Thomas's office. Nothing had changed since the last time Bill and I had visited together years earlier. The same oak desk, the same framed photographs, the same grandfather clock standing beside the bookshelf. Thomas stood as soon as he saw me. His expression softened. "Beverly, I'm sorry we have to meet like this." "So am I." He waited until I sat down before speaking again. "Did Bill's letter bring you here?" I nodded. "And the safe deposit box?" For the first time, Thomas looked relieved. "Then he trusted you to continue." The wording caught my attention. "Continue." Thomas folded his hands. Bill believed the truth had to unfold in a certain order. He made me promise I wouldn't interfere. I stared at him. "You knew." "I knew enough. But not everything. I never saw the journals. I never watched the videos." He kept those to himself. That sounded like Bill. He trusted people, just not completely. I reached into my bag and placed one of the legal folders on the desk. "I've seen these." Thomas adjusted his glasses. "Then you've already learned about the forged documents." "So they were real?" "Yes," he answered without hesitation. "They were very real." My stomach tightened. I was hoping they weren't. "So was Bill." Thomas opened the folder carefully. I helped him compare every document. He noticed inconsistencies long before anyone else would have. He slid 2 copies toward me, one genuine, one altered. The changes were subtle, but legally significant. I studied them again. I still don't understand. What exactly were they trying to do? Thomas took a slow breath. The forged versions would eventually have transferred ownership interests after Bill's death. Not immediately. Gradually. So no one would notice all at once. I closed my eyes. My God. Thomas nodded quietly. But here's the important part. It never happened. I looked up. "What?" He smiled gently. "Bill came to me before anyone could complete the process. We changed everything." "What do you mean?" "We rewrote the estate documents. We updated ownership records. We created additional legal protections. Every legitimate document replaced the vulnerable ones." I blinked. "So..." "The forged papers became useless." "Exactly." Thomas leaned back. "Whoever prepared them?" Never realized Bill had already moved ahead. Relief flooded through me. For the first time since Bill died, I knew the house truly was safe. Thomas continued. "Bill insisted on one condition." "What condition?" "No criminal charges?" I stared at him. "What?" "He said..." Thomas opened a notebook. I wrote down his exact words. He adjusted his glasses before reading aloud. "If there's still a chance to save my family, I won't destroy it from a courtroom." My eyes filled with tears. That sounded exactly like Bill. Thomas closed the notebook. I argued with him. I told him he should report everything immediately. He refused. He said the person responsible hadn't crossed the point of no return. I whispered. He believed they could still change. Thomas nodded. Yes. Completely. Silence settled between us. Finally, I asked the question that had haunted me for days. Did Bill ever tell you who it was? Thomas looked at me for a long moment, then slowly shook his head. No. My shoulders dropped. He deliberately kept that from me. Why? He said if I knew, someone might pressure me. He wanted only one person to carry the final truth. You. Even after everything. Bill had trusted me more than anyone else. The thought was comforting and terrifying. Thomas reached into a drawer. I do have something for you. He removed a sealed envelope. My name appeared across the front. Bill's handwriting again. I stared at it. There are more letters. Thomas smiled sadly. Bill believed words should arrive when people were ready. He left this with me 2 years ago. He instructed me to give it to you only after you visited the bank. I carefully accepted the envelope. It felt lighter than the others, almost empty. You haven't read it. Thomas shook his head immediately. I gave him my word. I slipped it into my purse without opening it. Not yet. There were already too many voices inside my head. Thomas stood and walked toward a filing cabinet. He unlocked it, then removed one thin folder. I can show you one last thing. Inside were copies of every legal change Bill had made. Dates, signatures, official seals, everything. Thomas pointed to the final page. Do you see this clause? I read silently. If fraudulent documents are presented after my death, they shall automatically be deemed invalid. I looked up. He anticipated that. Thomas smiled. He anticipated almost everything. Then his smile faded. Except one thing. What? How quickly his health declined. I swallowed hard. If he'd lived another year. Thomas paused. I believe he would have handled everything himself. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Then I asked quietly, was Bill angry? Thomas thought carefully before answering. No. He was heartbroken. There's a difference. That answer hurt more than I expected, because I knew Bill. He rarely stayed angry, but heartbreak, that stayed with him. As I prepared to leave, Thomas walked me to the door. Beverly. One more thing? Yes. If someone approaches you about selling the house, don't agree to anything. I won't. Not until you've finished everything Bill left. I promise. Outside, I sat in my car without starting the engine. My phone buzzed. A text from Melissa. Mom, Jason and I were wondering if you've thought any more about the house. My fingers froze over the screen. Barely 30 minutes later, another message appeared. This one from Daniel. Can we meet tonight? I can't keep this to myself much longer. I stared at both texts. One wanted to discuss the house. The other wanted to confess something. For the first time, I realized Bill hadn't only left me evidence, he had left me time. Time to watch, time to listen, time to discover who was speaking out of love and who was speaking out of fear. I reached into my purse, touched the unopened envelope Thomas had just given me. Then I made my decision. Before meeting either of my children, I would read every last word my husband had left behind. Because somehow, I knew the next letter would prepare me for the conversation that was about to change my family forever. That evening, I set the dining room table for 6, just as I had every Sunday for years. The habit felt almost automatic. 6 plates, 6 glasses, 6 cloth napkins. For one painful moment, I reached for a 7th. Bills. My hand stopped in midair. I quietly put it back in the cabinet. Tonight wasn't really about dinner. It was about watching, listening, exactly as Bill had asked me to do. At 5:30, Daniel and Emily arrived first. Emily carried a homemade peach cobbler. Daniel hugged me a little longer than usual. "You okay, Mom?" "I've had better weeks." He nodded. "I miss him too." There was no hesitation in his voice, only grief. 20 minutes later, Melissa and Jason walked in with Noah. Noah ran straight toward me. "Grandma!" He wrapped his arms around my waist before anyone else had even taken off their coats. His innocence grounded me. For one brief second, I forgot about journals, letters, and forged documents. I simply hugged my grandson. Dinner began quietly. Emily talked about her students. Noah proudly announced that his baseball team had finally won a game. Jason joked about burning hamburgers at a neighborhood cookout. Everyone laughed. If a stranger had walked through the front door, they would have seen an ordinary American family sharing dinner. Only I knew how fragile that picture had become. Halfway through the meal, Melissa looked around the room. "It feels strange without Dad." "It does," I answered. She lowered her eyes. "He always sat right there." She pointed toward Bill's empty chair. No one spoke for several seconds. Finally, Daniel broke the silence. He hated when dinner got too quiet. Emily smiled softly. He always started telling terrible jokes. Even I laughed. Bill's jokes had been awful, deliberately awful. He believed groaning was just another form of laughter. For a few minutes, the evening almost felt normal. Then Melissa cleared her throat. "Mom." "Here it comes," I thought. "I've been thinking. I know this house means everything to you. But it's a lot for one person." Jason remained unusually quiet. Melissa continued. "Maybe it's time to think about something smaller?" I looked at her calmly. "What makes you think that?" She blinked. "I just worry. I don't want you living here alone. I've lived here for 43 years. I know every squeaky floorboard. I've never been afraid of this house." She forced a smile. "I'm not talking about fear. I'm talking about practicality." I nodded slowly. "Have you already looked at retirement communities?" The question caught her completely off guard. "What?" I asked if you've already been looking. Her eyes flickered toward Jason, only for a fraction of a second. Maybe a little. Online." Jason finally spoke. "Just to see what's available." His answer came too quickly. I noticed Daniel watching both of them. He wasn't eating anymore. He stared down at his plate. Bill had been right. Someone was staying silent. I decided to change the subject. "Daniel, when was the last time you spoke privately with your father?" He looked up immediately. "About 3 weeks before he died." "What did you discuss?" His fork stopped halfway to his mouth. "Just family things." "What family things?" He hesitated. Emily looked at him with quiet surprise. "You never mentioned that." Daniel swallowed. "It wasn't important." I watched his face carefully. For the first time that evening, he looked uncomfortable. Not guilty. Burdened. There was a difference. Melissa suddenly interrupted. "Mom, why are you asking all these questions?" I smiled gently. "I'm getting older. I've realized I don't know as much about my own family as I thought." The room became very still. Noah looked around in confusion. Then he whispered, "Grandpa used to ask lots of questions too." Every adult at the table froze, even Jason. I noticed it immediately. Melissa forced another smile. "He was always curious." Noah shook his head. "No." He said, questions help people tell the truth. The silence that followed felt endless. Emily finally reached over and squeezed Noah's shoulder. That's a smart thing to remember. He smiled proudly. I know. Grandpa told me. Dinner continued, but the atmosphere had changed. Every sentence now sounded measured, careful. After dessert, Jason stepped outside to answer a phone call. Melissa immediately followed him. Through the kitchen window, I watched them talking near their SUV. They weren't arguing, but they were speaking urgently. Jason kept looking back toward the house. Toward me. Inside, Daniel remained seated at the table. He stared at Bill's empty chair. Without warning, he said quietly, I should have told him sooner. I turned toward him. What do you mean? His eyes widened. Nothing. Emily frowned. Daniel. He stood abruptly. I need some air. Then he walked out the back door. Emily looked at me apologetically. I don't know what's bothering him. I think he's been carrying something since your diagnosis. My diagnosis? She smiled sadly. I meant Bill's. He blamed himself for not visiting more often. That explanation sounded believable. Yet Bill's videos echoed inside my head. If Daniel stays quiet? Listen. I excused myself and quietly stepped onto the back porch. Daniel stood near the old swing Bill had built years ago. His shoulders were slumped. I joined him. Neither of us spoke at first. Finally, I said, You wanted to tell me something. He nodded, then shook his head, then nodded again. I don't know how. I waited. I've disappointed Dad. My heartbeat quickened. How? His eyes filled with tears. I should have said something. There were things I noticed. My breath caught. What things? Before he could answer, the back door opened. Melissa stepped outside. There you are. She looked from Daniel to me. I've been looking everywhere. Daniel immediately wiped his eyes. I'm fine. Melissa studied him for a second, then forced a smile. We should probably get Noah home. The moment disappeared, whatever Daniel had almost confessed. He swallowed it. As everyone prepared to leave, Noah hugged me one last time. Then he whispered so quietly, only I could hear, Grandma. I leaned closer. Yes. Mom cries when she thinks nobody sees. I looked toward Melissa. She was helping Jason buckle Noah's backpack into the SUV. She looked exhausted, not angry, not cold, just tired. Heartbreakingly tired. After they drove away, the house fell silent again. I walked into Bill's study. The unopened envelope Thomas had given me still rested on the desk. Beside it lay the final journal and 3 unwatched videos. Daniel had almost confessed. Melissa had pushed once again to discuss the house. Jason had watched every room he entered. Noah had innocently revealed more truth than all the adults combined. The pieces were finally moving, but they still refused to fit together. I reached for the final journal. My fingers stopped just above the cover. Something inside told me this book would be different. Not more clues, not more questions. The truth. Whatever Bill had discovered, he had written it here. And once I opened that cover, there would be no pretending our family was the same ever again. I carried the final journal into our bedroom. Not Bill's study, not the dining room. Our bedroom. It felt like the only place where I could face whatever waited inside those pages. I sat on the edge of the bed. His side remained untouched. His blue robe still hung behind the door. His slippers still rested beneath the nightstand. I ran my hand across the journal's cover. "This is it, isn't it?" I whispered. Then I opened it. The first page wasn't a journal entry. It was a letter. "Beverly, if you are reading this, you've already shown more patience than I could have hoped for. You have listened instead of accusing. You have observed instead of reacting. I'm proud of you." Fresh tears blurred the ink. Even now, Bill somehow knew exactly what I needed to hear. I turned the page. The first real entry was dated only 6 weeks before he died. Today, I finally learned the whole truth. My hands tightened around the journal. The forged signature belonged to one person. The silence belonged to another. I stopped breathing. Bill continued. They were not working together in the way I first imagined. One acted. The other discovered it afterward. Fear trapped them both. The puzzle suddenly became much clearer. There weren't two guilty people. There was one guilty person and one silent witness. I read on. I asked to meet Melissa alone. There it was. The conversation Noah had overheard, the one where Melissa cried. Bill described everything. She arrived believing I wanted to discuss my health. Instead, I placed the forged document in front of her. My heart pounded. She turned pale before she even touched the paper. She already knew what it was. I covered my mouth. Bill had known the truth from the moment he saw her face. He continued. I asked only one question. Melissa, did you do this? I could almost hear his voice asking it. Gentle, not angry, just heartbroken. The next paragraph was difficult to read through my tears. She cried before answering. Then she whispered, yes. The room around me disappeared. I stared at that single word. Yes, Melissa, my little girl, the child Bill used to carry on his shoulders, the little tornado who climbed every tree in the neighborhood. She had forged her father's signature. I kept reading because I knew I had to. She never denied it. She never blamed anyone else. She simply cried. Bill described their conversation in heartbreaking detail. Melissa admitted she had copied his signature after secretly meeting with someone who promised refinancing solutions. She believed that once ownership paperwork was transferred, she could borrow against future equity. She planned to repay everything before either parent ever discovered it. It had begun with panic, not greed, just as Bill had written. Jason's remodeling business had collapsed after losing several large contracts. Credit cards had reached their limits. Medical bills for Jason's father had piled up. Collection agencies had begun calling. They were drowning. Melissa believed she could rescue her family. She convinced herself no one would ever be hurt. Bill wrote, "Desperation has an incredible ability to disguise itself as hope." That sentence settled heavily inside me. Melissa hadn't woken up one morning intending to betray us. She had taken one terrible step, then another, until she couldn't find her way back. I turned another page. This one spoke about Daniel. 2 weeks after my conversation with Melissa, Daniel came to see me. So he had known. Bill described the meeting. Daniel had discovered irregular paperwork while helping organize tax records. He confronted Melissa privately. She confessed everything, then begged him not to tell anyone. He promised he would convince her to confess herself. But she never did. Daniel carried the burden alone. Bill wrote, "My son believed silence would protect his sister. Instead, silence imprisoned both of them." I closed my eyes. Poor Daniel. Every strange glance, every unfinished sentence, every moment of hesitation. Now they all made sense. He wasn't hiding his own guilt. He was carrying someone else's. The journal continued. I was disappointed in Daniel. Not because he loved his sister. Because love without honesty eventually becomes another lie. Those words struck me deeply. Bill wasn't condemning either child. He was grieving for both. I reached the final handwritten pages. I have already corrected every legal document. The house is protected. Our savings are protected. Our future is protected. Now only our family remains in danger. He underlined the last sentence twice. Then came another entry. Melissa begged me not to tell Beverly. Noah had remembered correctly. Bill described the moment. Melissa had fallen to her knees. She cried until she could barely breathe. She repeated the same sentence again and again. Please don't tell Mom. Please let me fix this first. Please don't let her hate me. I couldn't stop crying. Not because I excused what she had done, because I could finally see the frightened daughter beneath the terrible decision. Bill's next words shattered me. I told her something I hope she remembers forever. He had written their conversation word for word. Melissa, the forgery isn't the greatest tragedy. The greatest tragedy is believing you had to face your fear alone. I whispered, Oh, Bill. He always knew exactly what to say. The final page contained no evidence, no accusations, only instructions. Beverly. By now you know the truth. Please don't expose Melissa in front of the family. Speak to her alone. Let her choose honesty. If she still refuses, then tell Daniel I already forgave him. He'll understand what I mean. I frowned, forgave him for remaining silent. Bill had already forgiven him. The last paragraph was the hardest of all. If our children lose their mother after losing their father, then everything I protected will have been meaningless. Hold them accountable, but don't stop loving them. That was the final sentence. Nothing else. No signature. No goodbye. Only love. I closed the journal. For several minutes, I simply sat there, listening to the silence. Melissa had betrayed us. Daniel had hidden the truth. Everything Bill wrote was true. Yet somehow, I felt less angry than before, because now I understood what Bill had spent years trying to teach me. Truth without compassion destroys families. Compassion without truth destroys them too. The only path forward required both. My phone vibrated, a message from Melissa. Mom, can we meet tomorrow? There's something I can't keep hiding anymore. I stared at the screen. Then another message arrived, from Daniel. Please listen to Melissa before you judge her. I looked toward Bill's photograph on the nightstand. For the first time since his funeral, I knew exactly what came next. Tomorrow, my daughter was finally going to tell me the truth, and I already knew every word she was afraid to say. Melissa asked if we could meet somewhere private. Not at her house, not at mine. She chose a small park where Bill used to take Noah to feed ducks. I arrived 10 minutes early. The same wooden bench overlooked the quiet pond. I remembered Bill sitting there with a paper bag full of breadcrumbs while Noah laughed every time the ducks chased one another. Today, the bench felt much colder. Melissa arrived alone. No makeup, hair pulled back, dark circles beneath her eyes. She looked as though she hadn't slept in days. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. She sat beside me but kept her eyes on the water. Finally, she whispered, I know something changed. I didn't answer. She continued, Dad told you something. Didn't he? I looked at her calmly. Why would you think that? She gave a sad smile. Because you're looking at me the way he did. That sentence confirmed everything. Bill had been right. I took a slow breath. Melissa, is there something you want to tell me? She closed her eyes. I've practiced this conversation 100 times. I never imagined it would actually happen. Tears slipped down her cheeks. I'm so sorry, Mom. She hadn't confessed yet, but she was already apologizing. I waited. Silence often tells the truth faster than questions. Finally, she whispered, I forged Dad's signature. There it was. No excuses, no lies, only truth. Hearing it from her own lips hurt far more than reading it in Bill's journal. I know. Her head snapped toward me. You know, I know. She covered her face with both hands. Then she began sobbing. Not quietly, not politely. Years of fear seemed to pour out all at once. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I never wanted this. I reached into my purse, pulled out a handkerchief. She stared at it for several seconds before taking it. I thought I could fix everything before anyone found out. I know. She looked at me in disbelief. Dad told you. He left me enough to understand. She nodded weakly. He found out before you. Yes. She looked down. I'll never forget his face. He wasn't yelling. He wasn't angry. That made it even worse. Fresh tears rolled down her cheeks. He just looked heartbroken. I swallowed hard. Tell me everything. This time, she did. Jason's remodeling company had nearly collapsed after 2 major commercial clients declared bankruptcy. Payments never came. Loans remained. Credit cards grew. Then Jason's father became seriously ill. Insurance covered only part of the treatment. Medical bills exploded. Collectors called every day. Some even called during dinner. Melissa described hiding overdue notices before Noah could see them, selling jewelry, taking extra shifts, borrowing from retirement savings. Nothing worked. We were drowning. She wiped her eyes. One night, someone told us there was another way. She explained that an acquaintance introduced them to a dishonest financial consultant. He promised that temporary ownership paperwork could unlock emergency financing. He insisted everything would later be restored. It sounded illegal. So, why did you do it? She looked directly at me. Because I was terrified. Not greedy, terrified, exactly as Bill had written. I kept telling myself, just one signature, just one document, then I'll fix everything. But every lie needed another lie. She began crying again. I hated myself. I couldn't stop. I listened without interrupting. She continued. The day Dad confronted me, I wanted him to scream. I wanted him to throw me out. Instead, he hugged me. That surprised me. He hugged you. She nodded. I couldn't understand it. He just held me while I cried. Then she repeated Bill's words almost perfectly. He said, the forgery isn't the greatest tragedy. Believing you had to face your fear alone is. I closed my eyes. Bill really had said exactly what he wrote. Melissa continued. I begged him not to tell you. He asked why. I told him. Because losing your respect would hurt more than losing everything else. Neither of us spoke for a while. The wind gently moved the trees above us. Finally, I asked the next question. What about Daniel? She immediately looked ashamed. I ruined his life too. She explained everything. Daniel accidentally discovered altered paperwork while comparing tax files. He confronted her immediately. She confessed. She begged him for 1 month. Just 1 month to fix everything. Instead, weeks became months. Months became years. Daniel kept waiting, hoping she would tell us herself. She never did. I trapped him. I know. He wanted to tell Dad. I begged him not to. He chose me instead. I thought about Daniel sitting silently at Sunday dinner, carrying someone else's burden. Bill had understood him perfectly. Then I asked quietly, "What about Jason?" She looked toward the pond. He knew I was borrowing money. He didn't know about the forgery until after I'd already done it. So he didn't ask you to do it? No, he was furious. He wanted me to confess immediately. But, she lowered her head, I was too scared. That surprised me. In my imagination, Jason had become the mastermind. Instead, he had simply become another frightened person trapped inside the consequences. I've blamed him. I've blamed myself. I've blamed everyone. She laughed bitterly. The truth is, I made the decision. No one forced me. She reached into her purse, pulled out several envelopes. I've started paying everything back. Inside were receipts, loan statements, payment confirmations. We sold our second car. We moved into a smaller apartment. Jason works weekends now. I took another job. I'm fixing every dollar. I slowly looked through the paperwork. Every payment was real. Every balance had begun decreasing. I know money doesn't fix betrayal, she whispered. But I had to start somewhere. Then she surprised me. I've already called an attorney. I've signed a written confession. If you want to report me, I'll accept it. I looked at my daughter. She wasn't hiding anymore. She wasn't asking for excuses, only accountability. Bill had predicted this moment perfectly. He had written, "Let her choose honesty?" She had. At last. I folded the paperwork carefully, then asked one final question. Why now? She smiled sadly. Because Dad was right. The truth follows you. No matter how fast you run, she looked into my eyes. And because I couldn't bear watching you grieve him, while lying to you every single day. Silence settled between us. Finally, I reached across the bench, took her trembling hand. I cannot pretend this didn't happen. I know. I cannot promise everything will feel normal tomorrow. I know. I cannot erase what you've done. She nodded. I know. I squeezed her hand. But you're still my daughter. At those words, she completely broke down. She leaned against my shoulder and cried like the little girl who used to scrape her knees climbing trees. For a long time, neither of us moved. The betrayal remained. The pain remained. But for the first time, the lies were gone. And somehow, that felt like the beginning of healing. The morning after my conversation with Melissa, I walked into Bill's study one last time. Not because I was searching for more evidence. There wasn't any left to find. The truth had finally been uncovered. Instead, I was searching for something else. My husband's final guidance. 3 videos still remained on the flash drive. I made a fresh cup of coffee and pressed play. Bill appeared on the screen wearing the same blue flannel shirt. This time he smiled before saying a single word. If you've reached this video, then I believe Melissa has told you the truth. I froze. He had anticipated even this moment. I hope she cried. I hope she stopped running. And I hope you listened. A tear slipped down my cheek. I know you, Beverly. You always listen. He leaned back in his chair. Now comes the difficult part. Justice. He let the word linger. People confuse justice with revenge. They're not the same. I nodded without thinking. He continued. Revenge asks, how can I make someone suffer? Justice asks, how can I make sure the wrong is never repeated? That sounded exactly like Bill. Simple, clear, wise. He folded his hands. Melissa must accept responsibility. She cannot pretend this never happened. But she also cannot spend the rest of her life believing she's beyond forgiveness. His voice softened. If she believes she's beyond forgiveness, she'll eventually stop believing she's capable of becoming better. I paused the video. Those words stayed with me. They weren't only about Melissa. They were about all of us. I resumed the recording. Daniel. Bill smiled sadly. My boy. You've always believed keeping peace was the same as doing what's right. It isn't. I thought about Daniel's silence. How many sleepless nights had he endured? Bill continued. If Daniel apologizes, accept it. But remind him that protecting someone from consequences isn't love. It's fear. Again. Fear. That word had followed me through every letter, every journal, every video. Fear had nearly destroyed our family. Then Bill mentioned Jason. I've watched Jason carefully. I don't believe he created this situation. But I also believe he failed to stop it soon enough. He must carry that responsibility honestly. I appreciated the fairness in Bill's words. He wasn't excusing anyone. Neither was he condemning them beyond redemption. He simply wanted everyone to own their choices. Then he smiled again. And Noah. The warmth returned to his eyes. Please never let him feel responsible. He carried my letters, not my burdens. I laughed softly through my tears. Bill always knew exactly what Noah needed. The recording ended. I immediately opened the final video. This one was different. Bill wasn't sitting inside his study. He stood in our backyard beside the old oak tree. The same tree where we had hung a tire swing when Melissa was 9. The same tree where Daniel had once built a crooked birdhouse. The same tree where Noah now chased squirrels. Bill rested one hand against the trunk. I planted this tree before Melissa was born. I thought I was planting shade. He smiled. I was really planting time. He looked directly into the camera. Our family has survived illness, job losses, arguments, financial struggles, and now, betrayal. But families don't survive because nothing bad happens. They survive because someone chooses to love after the truth comes out. Those words settled deeply inside me. He wasn't asking me to ignore the betrayal. He was asking me to decide what came after it. Then he said something I would never forget. Beverly, for 47 years, I've been the one holding this family together. He smiled gently. It's your turn now. I couldn't stop crying. For decades, Bill had quietly carried everyone. Now he was placing that responsibility into my hands. The video ended. Silence filled the room. I looked around the study one last time. The journals, the folders, the letters, the flash drive. None of them were really about exposing Melissa. They were about preparing me to lead with wisdom instead of anger. That afternoon, I invited everyone to the house, not for confrontation, for honesty. Melissa arrived first. She looked nervous. Daniel came next. His face was pale. Jason followed quietly. Emily carried cookies, unaware of what the afternoon would become. Noah ran straight into the backyard to play. I asked the adults to sit in the living room. No one spoke. Finally, I broke the silence. I know everything. Melissa immediately looked down. Daniel closed his eyes. Jason took a slow breath. I also know why. Melissa whispered, I'm sorry. Daniel spoke next. So am I. I should have told you. Jason nodded. I should have insisted she confessed. I looked at each of them carefully. Then I said the words Bill had wanted me to understand. Every one of you made mistakes. But none of you are leaving this room carrying them alone anymore. Melissa burst into tears. I don't deserve that. No. You don't deserve to escape the consequences. She nodded. I understand. But you also don't deserve to lose your family forever. She looked at me in disbelief. What? I learned that from your father. Daniel finally spoke. What happens now? I reached into my purse, pulled out the repayment records Melissa had shown me. You continue. Every payment. Every promise. No more secrets. She nodded immediately. I will. Then I looked at Daniel. And you. If something is wrong, you tell the truth. Even when it's painful. He wiped away tears. I promise. Finally, I turned toward Jason. You support your wife, but never protect another lie. I won't. For the first time since Bill died, the room felt lighter, not happy, not healed, but honest. And honesty has a strange way of making even painful rooms easier to breathe in. Outside the window, Noah laughed as he chased butterflies across the yard. His laughter drifted through the open window. Melissa smiled through her tears. Dad would have loved hearing that. I looked toward Bill's favorite chair. I think he still does. In that moment, I finally understood something Bill had been trying to teach me all along. Families aren't saved by perfect people. They're saved by imperfect people who finally stop hiding from one another. Healing didn't arrive all at once. It came quietly, one ordinary day at a time. No dramatic speeches, no magical moment that erased everything. Just small choices, repeated over and over. 3 months passed. The seasons slowly changed. The maple leaves in our front yard began turning shades of gold and deep red. Bill always loved autumn. He used to say, trees aren't dying. They're simply brave enough to let go. I finally understood what he meant. Melissa and Jason moved into a modest townhouse nearly 30 minutes away. It wasn't the neighborhood they had dreamed of, but it was affordable. They sold furniture they didn't need, canceled expensive memberships. Every month, Melissa mailed me copies of her repayment records. I never asked her to. She did it because she wanted me to know she wasn't hiding anymore. One afternoon, she knocked on my front door carrying nothing but a small pumpkin pie. I made it myself. She smiled nervously. I remembered Dad liked pumpkin pie. I laughed softly. He loved pumpkin pie. He hated my crust. Melissa actually smiled. He told me once. He said yours looked beautiful, but tasted like cardboard. For the first time since everything happened, we laughed together. Real laughter, not forced, not polite. When we finished eating, she quietly reached into her purse. I almost forgot. She handed me a folded receipt. The final payment. I looked down. Every debt connected to the forged paperwork had been paid. Completely. She watched my face carefully. I know paying money doesn't erase what I did. No, it doesn't. She lowered her eyes. But it proves something. It proves you're no longer running. She nodded. I'm done running. I believed her, not because of the receipt, because her eyes no longer looked frightened. They looked honest. Daniel changed, too. One Saturday morning, he invited me to breakfast. Just the two of us. We sat in the same diner where Bill used to order blueberry pancakes every month. Daniel stared into his coffee for several minutes. Then he finally spoke. I've spent my whole life avoiding conflict. I thought it made me a peaceful person. He looked up at me. It actually made me a coward. I reached across the table. No. It made you human? He shook his head. I should have told you. I know. I thought protecting Melissa was kindness. But all I really protected was the lie. His voice cracked. Dad knew that before I did. I smiled sadly. Your father understood people better than either of us. Daniel laughed softly. He really did. Then he surprised me. I've started talking to my students about honesty. Not because of what happened, because I finally understand why truth matters. Bill would have been proud. Emily became the quiet glue holding everyone together. She never judged Melissa, never defended her either. She simply showed up. She invited Melissa for coffee. She checked on Jason. She made sure Noah never sensed division between the adults. One evening, I thanked her. She smiled. I didn't do anything special. You loved my family when it wasn't easy. That's special. She squeezed my hand. I learned that from you and Bill. Those words stayed with me. Perhaps love really does travel quietly from one generation to another. Jason changed in ways I never expected. He found steady work managing construction projects instead of chasing risky business deals. One afternoon, he asked if he could stop by. I owe you something. He stood awkwardly on my porch. I spent years believing success meant providing more. I almost lost everything that already mattered. His eyes filled with tears. I failed my wife. You failed yourself first. He nodded. You're right. I'll spend the rest of my life earning back both. I believed him too, not because of promises, because humble people sound different from desperate ones. And then there was Noah, the child who had unknowingly carried the weight of Bill's final plan. He never fully understood what had happened. Thankfully, he only noticed one important thing. The adults smiled more often again. One Saturday afternoon, he ran into the backyard carrying his baseball glove. Grandma, come throw with me. I laughed. I haven't played catch in years. You don't have to be good. You just have to try. That sounded exactly like Bill. As we tossed the ball back and forth, Noah suddenly asked, Grandma, yes, did Grandpa know we'd be okay? I looked towards the old oak tree, the same tree where Bill had recorded his last message. Yes, I think he did. How? Because he believed love is stronger than fear. Noah nodded, as though that explained everything. Maybe for children? It does. A week later, our family gathered for Sunday dinner again. The same table, the same 6 chairs. Bill's chair remained empty. But this time, no one avoided looking at it. Instead, Noah climbed onto his own chair and smiled. Can I tell Grandpa's favorite joke? Melissa laughed. I think he'd like that. Noah cleared his throat dramatically. What do you call a fish with no eyes? Everyone groaned immediately. I know this one. Daniel laughed. Noah grinned. A FH. The joke was terrible. Exactly the kind Bill loved. Laughter filled the dining room. I looked around the table. Melissa was smiling. Daniel was smiling. Emily was laughing. Jason was shaking his head. Noah looked impossibly proud. For one brief moment, I could almost imagine Bill sitting among us. Not because I forgot he was gone, because everything he loved still lived inside the people he left behind. After dinner, Melissa quietly walked beside me as we washed dishes. I still wake up some nights thinking about what I did. I nodded. So do I. She looked surprised. You do? I think I always will, she whispered. I'm sorry. I know. Then I smiled. And I also know you're becoming someone your father would recognize again. She cried quietly, not from shame this time, from relief. As the sun disappeared behind the trees, I stepped onto the back porch. The air felt cool, peaceful. For the first time since Bill died, the silence didn't feel lonely. It felt full of memories, full of forgiveness, full of hope. I looked toward the sky and whispered, "You were right, Bill." Our family survived. Not because we escaped the truth, but because we finally chose to face it together. Almost a year has passed since the day Noah slipped that old envelope into my hand. Sometimes I still think about how quietly everything began. Not with shouting, not with lawyers, not with police. Just a little boy whispering, "Grandma." Grandpa told me to wait until everyone stopped watching you. Those words changed my life. They also saved my family. Today, the house feels different. Not because the furniture has changed, not because the walls have been painted, because peace has returned. It isn't perfect peace. Perfect peace doesn't exist. It's the kind that comes after storms. The kind you appreciate because you remember what the storm felt like. Every Sunday, my family still gathers around the same dining room table. Bill's chair remains empty. No one has ever suggested moving it. It isn't a shrine. It isn't meant to make us sad. It's simply where he belongs. Sometimes Noah looks at that chair before telling one of Grandpa's terrible jokes. Every single time. We laugh. I think Bill would like that. Melissa continues rebuilding her life. She kept every promise she made. Every debt was repaid. Every legal issue was resolved. She even volunteered to speak at a local financial counseling program. The first time she told me about it, I looked at her in surprise. You want to tell strangers what happened? She nodded. If my mistake keeps someone else from making the same one, then maybe something good can come from it. I smiled. Your father would be proud of that. Her eyes filled with tears. I hope so. Jason rebuilt more than his career. He rebuilt trust. He no longer chased impossible business deals. He chose steady work, predictable work, honest work. One afternoon, he stood beside me after helping repair my porch steps. I spent years believing success meant making more money. He wiped the sweat from his forehead. Now I think success means sleeping without secrets. I smiled. I think Bill would agree. Daniel changed too. He became more confident. Not louder, just more honest. He stopped avoiding difficult conversations. One evening, he admitted something that made me smile. I've become the teacher Dad always wanted me to be. How I stopped trying to make everyone happy. I started trying to help them become better. That sounded remarkably like Bill. Emily remained exactly who she had always been. Kind, steady, patient. One afternoon, I asked her, "How did you manage to love all of us through this?" She laughed softly. I married into this family. I wasn't about to leave when things became difficult. Simple, beautiful, true. And Noah? Well, Noah is 10 now. He's taller, louder, still wonderfully curious. One Saturday, he found the old wooden box inside the treehouse again. the one that had once held Marble's baseball cards and Bill's little thank you note. He carried it inside. "Grandma, can I keep this?" "Of course. Really." "It belongs to you now." He smiled. "I'm going to put important things inside." "What kind of important things?" He thought carefully. "My Little League medal, my favorite baseball card, and Grandpa's note." I nodded. Those sound like the right kind of treasures. He looked at me seriously. "Grandpa trusted me." "He did." "Why?" I smiled. "Because he knew your heart." Noah looked satisfied with that answer. Children often understand the biggest truths more easily than adults. Later that evening, after everyone went home, I walked upstairs. I opened the dresser drawer where I now kept every letter Bill had written, the journals, the videos, the legal papers, everything. I no longer needed them. I already carried their lessons inside me. Still, I unfolded the very first hidden letter one last time. The one Noah had placed into my trembling hands after the funeral. This time, I didn't read it searching for clues. I read it searching for Bill, and suddenly, I noticed something I had overlooked all those months ago. Near the bottom of the page, almost squeezed into the margin, was one final handwritten sentence. It wasn't underlined. It wasn't dramatic. It simply read, "The last letter isn't this envelope." I frowned. What did he mean? I searched every page again? Nothing. Then I laughed. Not because I had found another clue, because I finally understood. The last letter had never been made of paper. It had been me. Bill hadn't been writing instructions. He had been writing me into the next chapter of our family's life. Every journal had strengthened my judgment. Every video had softened my anger. Every hidden message had prepared me to become the person our family needed after he was gone. The inheritance wasn't the house. It wasn't the savings. It wasn't the evidence. It was trust. Bill trusted me to choose wisdom over revenge, truth over denial, compassion over bitterness. That was the greatest gift he ever gave me. I carefully folded every letter, placed them back into the wooden box, closed the lid. Outside, the evening sun painted the backyard in warm, golden light. The old oak tree stood exactly where Bill had planted it all those years ago. Its branches were wider now, stronger, just like our family. Not because nothing had tried to break us, because we had continued growing anyway. I stepped onto the back porch carrying 2 mugs of coffee. Out of habit, I placed one on the small table beside the empty chair. For a moment, I imagined Bill smiling at me, not saying a word, just smiling, the way he always did whenever he believed I had finally figured something out on my own. I lifted my own mug. "Thank you for trusting me." A gentle breeze moved through the trees. Some people would call it coincidence. I choose to call it an answer. As I looked across the backyard, I saw Noah running after a baseball while Melissa laughed from the porch steps. Daniel was helping Jason repair the fence. Emily was taking pictures of everyone. The people who had once been separated by fear now stood together because of truth. I realized something then. Families are never remembered for the mistakes that almost destroyed them. They're remembered for the love that refused to let them stay broken. And that's exactly how I want to remember mine. After everything my family went through, I realized that the deepest wounds are rarely caused by strangers. They usually come from the people we love the most. That truth is painful, but it doesn't have to be the end of the story. Fear can make good people make terrible decisions. Pride can keep us silent when we should speak. Shame can convince us that we're beyond forgiveness. But honesty has a remarkable power. It doesn't erase the past, yet it gives us a chance to build a better future. My husband could have chosen revenge. He had every reason to expose everyone immediately. Instead, he chose wisdom. He understood that justice without compassion leaves only broken people behind. At the same time, compassion without accountability allows the same mistakes to happen again. Real forgiveness is not pretending nothing happened. It is facing the truth, completely accepting responsibility, and deciding that love is still stronger than bitterness. If there's someone in your life you've been avoiding because of an old hurt, perhaps today is the day to start a conversation. It may not fix everything overnight, but healing almost always begins with one honest sentence. And if you're carrying guilt for something you've done, remember this: admitting the truth takes far more courage than hiding it. Every day you choose honesty is another step toward becoming the person you truly want to be. Life is precious. Time with the people we love is never guaranteed. Say the words that matter while you still can. Forgive when it's possible. Ask for forgiveness when it's needed. And never let fear make decisions that love should make instead. If this story touched your heart, I'd truly love to hear from you. Have you ever had to forgive someone who deeply hurt you? Or do you believe some betrayals can never be forgiven? Share your thoughts in the comments. I read them all, and your experiences may encourage someone else who needs hope today. If you enjoyed this story, please take a moment to like the video and subscribe for more heartfelt family stories that remind us how powerful love, truth, and second chances can be. And before you go, tell me where you're watching from and what time it is where you are. I always enjoy seeing how this community comes together from all around the world.